But here we have our pack. It is 7 o'clock here in Ely, Minnesota. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I just asked our longtime volunteer Tanya Rurik to come out with some venison cakes. Usually they hear the sound of the container with the treats and they'll come and check it out. And so that's what kind of brought them down. Um, First was Rika, she was at the pump house, and then the rest must have been somewhere in the den. Um, Somebody was asking about the heat. Um, Today was for us a little bit chillier than it has been. Like I think it was in the high 50s, maybe 60s. And then so not terrible, but still it's kind of warm for wolves around this time. And it's just very buggy. Um, a lot of mosquitoes. We don't even have all of the bugs out yet. Just mosquitoes. We've had a wave of black flies, or some other people know them as black flies, and wolves have been, I think, taking a lot of shelter mostly from bugs, especially blackstone. Um, so um, Recently, most of the wolves are out and interacting, but blackstone will go ahead and hide for a little bit. In the medical pen, he's been using that space quite a bit, and I think they might be in there right now. They've been using the medical pen a lot. We'll give a little bit of a wolf care update towards the end, but um, we usually, we have wood shavings in there, and we usually spray that with the natural bug repellents that we use on a daily basis to kind of provide some space for them to try to like some kind of comfort away from the bugs. So the medical pen is one. We also have the Bolt Spyway, and we haven't been necessarily using that as much, but we also have searching. We also have some more bedding under the eaves. Um, this is right by the enrichment window, and they've been also using this quite a bit, especially during the harsher weather we've had in the past few days. If you've heard anything about what we've received in the past week, you would know that it's been a lot of rain, a lot of weird weather. But yeah, this is another place that they've been spending a lot of time sort of taking refuge from weather and bugs because we spray this area as well. And it seems to help. It doesn't eliminate completely the bugs, but it certainly helps. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna go ahead um, and I'll show you what the agenda looks like. Today I'm joined by Lexi, Golf Care Specialist, and I'm gonna share PowerPoint briefly here. Second. All right. So today's our summer solstice webinar titled Goodbye Winter Coat. I don't know if you saw Blackstone, he's not quite let go of it, but most of the wolves you'll see that they're looking pretty ready for summer. And summer solstice, for those of you who are not familiar with that term, it is the longest day of the year, like daylight, and today is the summer solstice for the northern hemisphere of our planet. So we usually kind of have a webinar in these like marked seasonal changes throughout the year. So for today, hopefully this works. Yep. For today, we're going to talk a little bit about wolf summer ecology, adaptations. We'll touch a little bit on those physical changes, behavioral patterns across the seasons, with a little bit more focus on the summertime. And same with diet and hunting behavior, what we typically see in the summertime. Lexi will then take over with some exhibit pack updates. And then this is a little bit different from our usual week, but we're going to do our midweek feeding today. We thought it would be a nice way to tie in with today's topic on wolf summer ecology, we're going to be feeding a beaver or a couple of beaver carcasses that come from local trappers. So we are very grateful for those relationships we've formed with local sources. After that, we can kind of see how they are interacting while the feeding. Hopefully they're interested enough. I know last week they weren't as interested with the beaver, but I think they were very hungry this morning, so maybe we'll have some interesting behaviors and we can have a bit of an open Q&A moment there after feeding. So yeah, as usual, please use the Q&A tab to type any questions that you may have. I'm happy to answer as I go through, but also, again, we'll have a big, we'll have some good time towards the end to go over questions if they don't get answered by Lexi while we're talking or by me. So yeah. So in terms of these summer changes, here's a photo of Cass to kind of appreciate how different he looks maybe from the winter. You can see he still has a little bit of his undercoat left to shed, and usually we see the same with Rika and Grayson. Blackstone is still, like I said, holding on to his undercoat, his winter coat for a little bit longer, maybe just to protect him from the bugs. I don't know what his plan is, but you can see Cass is still kind of working on that neck area and also kind of towards the back legs. But he's pretty much shed out that winter coat and he's ready for what's to come. We're not really, what we're seeing this summer is a little bit different than the usual. Or I shouldn't say than the usual, but maybe last summer. It has been very wet, lots of rain. So I don't think temperatures necessarily like hit the highest yet, but it is probably coming here soon. July, August is usually, I think, some of our hottest time of the year. But yeah, wolves in general around this time of the year, they'll look maybe a little bit patchy, still kind of that transition of their winter coat to the summer, kind of shedding that undercoat. So that's what we're seeing here and taking advantage a lot of the water sources. Again, it is still kind of warm for wolves. So even though it's not the hottest, it's still warm. So we'll talk a little bit about a pond drama towards the end when we talk about exhibit pack updates, but finally we have here Cass taking advantage of that. And this was a photo taken just yesterday. We did an enrichment that sort of involved a little bit of the pond. So yeah, that's how they're looking around this time of the year right now in the exhibit. But wolves in the wild, what are they up to this time of the year? Let me see if this can play as we talk, but can you hear that well, Lexi? Okay. So pack around this time of the year is usually pretty busy caring for pups. They're likely transition out of their dens or maybe in that process to a rendezvous site with kind of like the heat of the day. Again, wolves will kind of change those activity patterns throughout the year and sort of adjust depending on just kind of like the light patterns and weather, climate, all that. So this time of the year, it's hotter. So they sometimes try to adapt that and do a little bit more nighttime activity. So that being said, that's great for them, right? Trying to figure out how to survive in the summer months. But when it comes to studying wolves in the summer, if you follow projects like the Voyagers Wolf Project in northwestern Minnesota, you have probably learned that wolf summer studies are kind of rare. They've become maybe a little bit more common now, but they're very challenging. Tracking wolf movement is hard. This is partly because of, we have, especially in places like here in Minnesota, where wolves are found, it's just, wetlands. It's just kind of hard to follow them versus looking at them in the wintertime when you can maybe have an easy aerial view using a plane and kind of track them like that. Um, just a little bit better visibility with that snow cover. But in the summer, it's a lot harder to track. Their packs are also a little bit less cohesive. Wolves generally travel as a pack during the winter, but in summer they're often just kind of foraging it more individually or in dyads and twos. And generally each individual will return to the den or the rendezvous site each day or so. But it's a little bit less of pack movements and more a little less cohesive. So again, it's hard to follow that activity. Again, increased nighttime activity. That's also kind of hard to follow, visibility wise and just logistics, right? For that reason, and thankfully, I think wolf research has come a long way, and there's a lot of innovative methods and technologies that have helped with sort of breaking these kind of barriers for scientists. And things like scat sampling, it has been used for a while, but there's now like different ways to study scat and be able to, for example, ID individuals or sort of track their movements, do maybe stable isotope analysis and get a better idea of their diet, or just, I guess scientists have been using scat for a really long time to study diet, but now different approaches have kind of come up with different technologies being available. Camera traps, as you know, are huge, but not only that, GPS collars and collars with cameras. So this picture here, and there's, if you want, Voyager's Wolf Project has a web page and a YouTube page, and they have a lot of examples of how they conduct their studies. And one, they have a video of a camera collar and sort of sharing that perspective from the wolf. And I think this was maybe might have been, more of a spring through summer kind of study. But again, and I think there's still things coming up that help with the study of wolves in the summer, especially in places like Minnesota that are a lot more like wetlands or more wooded areas. I think some other study sites might be a little bit easier if it's an open, kind of like a grassland or something like that. It's a little bit easier to track movements or behaviors even. I think I've talked a little bit about this, so I'm kind of looping back to kind of talk about how there's a lot of different, seasonal patterns in wolf behavior. And this particular study in Yellowstone, they were looking at seasonal patterns and the frequency of daytime howling by Yellowstone wolves. And you can see kind of like this clear pattern of, or let's say kind of a clear dip in that daytime howling around this time of the year. So some of those peaks were kind of around breeding season. And then it abruptly kind of decreased through March and April. But howling at den sites kind of remained pretty frequent in April and May, and then low all summer. So June, July, August, pretty low in comparison to the other times of the year. And so it also kind of became, it's not just frequency that they were looking at, they also looked at, is the howling directed, maybe is it intra-pack communication, so like communication within the pack, or is there some kind of inter-pack differences? And so when it became in the summer like low, it kind of also become almost exclusively from inter-pack communication to intra-pack. So it was more about communicating within the pack, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it. You can kind of relate that a little bit to, that's the time when they're kind of caring for pups and sort of maybe a little bit more like we were saying, less cohesiveness and maybe trying to like get back together. So it kind of ties up with that. And then the interpack sort of communication also. It was more so in that breeding season and pre-breeding season. So kind of makes it kind of makes that puzzle make a little bit of sense. This one also sort of looping back to this one as well. Mortalities and attacks at dens in Yellowstone. We see another dip around the summertime. So higher, kind of like in the October, December time frame, and then you see that it's sort of activities are more centered about, again, that focus on pups, taking care of that, and it's way more centered around the dens, and so it makes sense. And another very important thing that has been learned with this seasonal changes and studying wolves in the summer is that we always talk about how they mainly eat ungulates, so deer, moose, elk. You have to kind of hunt as a pack, cohesively and sort of strategically. But in reality, we've learned that wolves are opportunists. So they are considered carnivores, but they are highly opportunistic, and they have high dietary plasticity. So they can sort of adjust to kind of like the availability of food and prey. So that has been key, and I'll show you several examples in different places on how they kind of adjust their diet during this time. So again, looking back at the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, they did spatial and temporal variability in summer diet study, and they found that right around this time, there's a large component of medium-sized prey and some smaller-sized species in their diet. In terms of biomass, they still, elk was still an important part of their diet in that region, but there was also a lot of variation throughout the year and variation between packs, depending on, so the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is not just Yellowstone National Park, but there's parts outside of Yellowstone that were included in the study. And so when they compared packs, they found a lot of variation. And again, this is a reflection of their opportunistic nature and sort of like what's available for them. And that flexibility, that they have. This figure sort of gives you an idea of what that, looking at the scat, what they found in terms of occurrence and relative biomass. So occurrence is like how often they would find that, and then biomass is like, let's say, how much of the scat was kind of, let me see how I explain this the best way, but so the occurrence is more as like how much you would find it, but the biomass is kind of like the, let me make sure, kind of like the importance of it, I would say, in other words, in terms of how much was found in there. So it looks like neonate cervid, so that's, let's say, like fawns were a big part, and they kind of rely a lot on that, especially, and we can see that in other places too, towards the beginning of the summer, or when you still kind of have that available. And then again, elk was still pretty important, deer, but they were including, a lot of other things in there as well. Looking at other places, it's interesting to see, obviously, based on what's available. So in Poland, this study looked at temporal changes in wolf diet, and wild boar was probably the most important one over beaver, and then roe deer. So around this time of, spring, summer, that was the biggest or the most important prey items for them. And when we say that predator niche breadth was broader, in spring and summer, and is that it kind of expanded. Their diet became a little bit more variable, or kind of expanded, versus the other seasons that they compared it to was fall winter season. So again, more things become available, so they're likely to exploit that. And if the other, maybe the winter kind of prey items that are maybe not as available during this time, so they kind of have to adjust. They also consumed more beavers more often in ice-free seasons and drier years. So again, some very interesting variations across sites depending on what environmental factors are impacting there. And then looping back to Minnesota, because I think Voyager's Wolf Project has been very successful at showing a lot of video, a lot of resources. And so if you've never seen a wolf eating blueberries, and I'll let you maybe read the text here. Let me go back, I'm sorry. Should be here. Okay. So during summer, in the dense forests of the greater Voyager's ecosystem, we see wolves forage extensively on blueberries. And I'll show you an animation that kind of shows you how variable that diet is during the summer. And they can make up to 83% of their weekly diet during that time of the year. And it has been known for a while. And in other places too, it has been known that they can exploit different kinds of berries. In this case, it's blueberries, but okay. I'll stop clicking on it. So not only it has been an important food source for the individual, but also for providing food to the pups. So again, they found piles of regurgitated berries for those pups. And again, that was the first known observations. And then again, this is not necessarily something that is happening in every study site. I think there's a lot more to learn, especially as we expand, and like maybe other sites can add camera traps or like these kinds of technologies. Maybe we find out about other sources of food that can be as important. But yeah, very interesting, and certainly visit their channels and their webpage to learn a little bit more. But I also, I guess, take the opportunity. Let me see. There we go. Here's an animation that's also from their website, and it looks at, let me start this. It looks at the different, let's say, food items, the percent of weekly wolf diet, and looks from June to October. And I know this is kind of hard to follow. It goes fast, and I always have to stop it for myself. But you can see how fawn starts really high around this time, right? About 80%. And you still have some other things happening, like small mammals, hares, there's a lot of other things happening. I don't think they include berries in here, but even bear, and I think that's been a big question too around the hunting season. It kind of shows up in September for a few weeks, and in Minnesota, this is when it's bear season. and they start scavenging on gut piles of hunter-killed bears. It's an easy access free meal. Um, they also have been seen, I don't think it's included in here, but they've also been seen exploiting those bear bait piles. But yeah, but this is just a reflection of how highly variable and how it's constantly changing as different things become available throughout the summer. And as maybe it becomes a little bit harder to catch adult deer or catch bigger prey that can, outrun them in the forest. So very interesting. Here's another animation, and it's just showing you by pack. Each one of those lines is a different pack in their study site and Voyagers. And then it shows you all the different food items here from April to October. So the first one is adult deer, then fawn, beaver, berries, snowshoe hare, and moose. And you can kind of see how nothing here for berries. It peaks around here in August, then dips down. So very interesting to see these changes throughout the season. And again, another reflection of how, again, to change from, something that will give you so much like eating a deer or a beaver to berries, it really is telling you like you can be kind of desperate. It is an important food source for sure during maybe times that you're struggling. So again, they do this also through scat analysis, not just camera traps. They do have a lot of different methods to study diet and study wolf ecology in the summer. Okay. Another kind of it was more of like an opportunistic or like an opportunity observation they had was of a trumpeter swan. And it's known that or it's been previously observed wolves raiding nests of trumpeter swans to eat the eggs. But in this case, this was an adult, it seemed like it was an adult swan that was attacked in Voyagers in the summer, again, August 2017. So this is something that it is kind of rare. It has been kind of seen before in other parks, like in Yellowstone. Not a super common thing, but it can happen again. Going back to how these animals are opportunistic and they'll exploit whatever resource they can as possible. So with that, I should say that if you haven't been here to the International Wolf Center Interpretive Center, we do have a new temporary exhibit that we sort of put together with the Voyagers Wolf Project. It's called Starvation, Adaptation, and Survival. And it shares a lot of the most important insights they've learned from almost a decade of research that they've conducted. You can kind of learn about that crucial role of wolves in Minnesota, including, wetlands and forests, because that's kind of like the ecosystem that we have in Voyagers. It's a beautiful but also very interactive exhibit. So I invite you all to come and see it. It's pretty cool and pretty insightful. So it's going to be, I don't know that I have an end date, but probably until October or so, but don't quote me on that. All right, now if there's no questions, I'll let Lexi kind of take over the exhibit pack updates, and yeah, I'll mute myself and let her take over.
Okay. I hope everyone can you see me and hear me? Okay, awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. So I think I'm ready to get started. Giselle, if you want to hit play. So we've got our pack update. Giselle kind of mentioned some of this earlier, but it has been a very buggy season so far. Lots of mosquitoes, lots of black flies, Here we have a video. It looks like it paused, or maybe it's just lagging. There we go. Yeah, so we've got Blackstone in the front here, Rika in the back, and you can just see those bugs flying all over, especially Blackstone. And you could see he's kind of twitching his ears. There's Grayson adding in always so good. But yeah, we've been seeing a lot of the ear twitches, the muzzle scratching. Blackstone even sometimes kicks his back legs when they're starting to get his legs. So you could just see there's some discomfort here. So wolf care staff always tries to try to remedy this as much as possible. Um, so we use cedar chips a lot in their resting spaces. So we've got cedar chips under the eaves. We have it in the medical pen in Bolt's Byway. Cedar is just like a natural kind of bug repellent. And then we also put actual natural bug repellents both in their spaces and on them. So things with like lemongrass, peppermint, cedar. Um, Again, Giselle kind of mentioned this, it doesn't completely get rid of them, but it just kind of helps to keep them at bay so that they're not having to deal with so much of the bugs. So again, we kind of have this video here showing sometimes you'll see them kind of run in circles. That's when you could tell they're really kind of bugging them. So we're typically going out and kind of putting bug spray out in the space and on them twice a day. Again, really good picture that wolf care staff caught here. Abby got of just all of these bugs all over Kaz as he's trying to scratch them off. Um, but I feel like we always kind of talk about this, but these are wolves, so it's kind of different than maybe trying to even apply bug spray to your pets, your dogs at home. Sometimes they're a little avoidant, so we do like to try and find different ways to have them apply it. So again, Grayson's kind of doing a really great like non-touching sort of mode where we'll go around and spray the bug spray on rocks. Then they can kind of do that natural wolf behavior of scent rolling. Um, Sometimes we'll even get it all the way down his body, which is great. Now for a wolf like Rika, she's pretty tolerant of kind of rubbing it on her neck and all over her belly. Now we're kind of moving over here into kind of our dynamics. So here we could see kind of our typical interactions from the pack. Grayson is still very much, the dominant individual in this pack, but we're always seeing that kind of, that he sort of focuses on Kaz just a little bit more so in just a testing behavior. So often these kind of interactions are happening over food. Maybe Kaz wants whatever food Grayson has, and we'll come up and do some appeasement, maybe some begging behavior, and Grayson will kind of set his boundaries with wanting to keep his food source. Of course, we know Rika has been known to kind of focus on Grayson's rear. As you can see in this video, though, it doesn't always end up like that. If Grayson is sort of setting boundaries with Kaz and kind of interacting with him, Rika doesn't always come up and focus on the rear. She's actually doing some social engagement. She's got that big sweeping tail. She's getting low, doing play bows. A little bit of chin rest, but also some face licking. So it can vary a lot depending on situations. This video is to kind of talk about summertime enrichment. So we have our enrichment program that we do twice per day here in the summer. Not only so people can kind of see the wolves and watch them be a little active, but we also really like to kind of stimulate the wolves with lots of different items that can smell, taste, look interesting. These are some grouse pieces. And this is a really great example of what we were just talking about here with Grayson, eating a grouse piece. And Giselle, do you want to pause it real quick so we can kind of delve into this a bit more? Because Giselle and I were just having a really interesting conversation about this. But you could see that Grayson, currently had the grouse in his mouth and Kaz kind of came over. He got low, he put his ears back, started kind of doing that tight tail wag, kind of that telltale Kaz appeasement, begging behavior. Grayson sticks his tail high up, giving that growl warning, and then you could see it kind of continues on where Blackstone kind of went towards Grayson, kind of acting like maybe he was gonna beg too. But something Giselle was saying that we've been noticing a lot is that Grayson is very hesitant to correct Blackstone. And something we've been seeing a lot is that maybe, you know, Blackstone tries to test the waters a bit with Grayson, and he will actually go and kind of redirect it a bit on Kaz. So it's very interesting. It seems that Grayson just doesn't really seem to do a lot of corrections with Blackstone, but more so with Kaz there. So just some new things we're seeing, interesting behaviors. But if we continue on, we'll see a little bit of Kaz there too. That's a good point. He's been doing a lot of write-ups on Blackstone. So we've been seeing that too, especially within these past 2 days. Maybe it's Blackstone seeming a little weaker to Kaz because he's been so stressed about bugs that he's kind of picking up on that behavior and wanting to test him for rank as much as he can. Of course, we can't really know, but definitely something we've been noticing in the past couple days. A lot of write-ups with Kaz and Blackstone. But this video here is kind of going over weather. Like Giselle was saying, we've had some pretty substantial storms these past, last week and this week. This is a video from June 12th, and we had a very substantial hailstorm. And so what we thought was really interesting about this, first of all, is that the wolves didn't seem to take cover. You could see they kind of start running around. They're looking up at the sky. Rek is actually doing some investigative behaviors. She actually seems to pick up a piece of the hail and kind of move it around in her mouth. Then we get some more running. You know, they seem to definitely be reacting to the hail, but again, they're not really going to seek cover. So that was very surprising to us. And kind of interesting to get to go back and catch this on our cams. Then we had another storm up here on the 18th, so just a few days ago. There was actually tornado warnings for this one, so it was a pretty severe storm. Oh, we're having some more running here. I'm talking about the next storm, and the wolves are still going. But yeah, you could see again some of those kind of behaviors of avoidance are definitely kind of causing Rika to kind of zero in on Grayson a bit, and she's kind of picking up on him feeling nervous. I think that's another thing, Giselle, you and I were talking about. Well, let's see. But yeah, then you could see Kaz kind of goes up again with those low ears. Rika kind of doing her signature, kind of moving towards the back, ears down, thinking about maybe getting Grayson's rear there. Now this is a 618 storm, a very loud storm too. So you could see for this one, the wolves did decide to take cover under the eaves with all those cedar chips. That's huge lightning strike. And then the thunder rolls in. And you can see they're all kind of turning their heads, reacting, taking in the sounds and the sights, but not really bothered. I think it's really interesting because, again, they're wolves. Wolves in the wild would be dealing with storms just like these guys. But there really was not any stress. They are living in a human-based environment, and I think the socialization that we do with them from such an early age as pups has kind of allowed for kind of feeling safe and kind of comfortable in this space while such a heavy storm is occurring.
Cool. Thank you, Alexei, for narrating all that. One last, let me see, one last update here. As I was mentioning earlier, we finally got our pond working, and it makes us so happy because it is such an important resource for them during the summer. Um, just for, sort of regulating that, heat or kind of surviving that heat of the summer. They have that available to go in and sort of refresh and feel a little bit better when it's really hot, help with bugs, kind of thing. And so we finally got it working. I think officially was it yesterday? It feels like I'm like a longer ago, but um yeah, it was a long process, as you know from the past updates. We had a pipe kind of crack, so it was leaking. Then I think we had some issues with the pond skimmer. Like, so inside of the pump house, there's some other elements that needed replacement. We had worked on replacing them even before we started this whole pond thing. We had replaced it, but it didn't quite stay in place. So we had to troubleshoot through that and find a way to like really seal it in place, that pond skimmer box. Then once we got that, we had to work on replacing like UV filter equipment, which we already had, and we were ready to have that go. But then we noticed some leaks. So again, this is a pond that has had many years, and wear and tear happens. So there was a lot of troubleshooting through making sure that there were no leaks, making sure that it was functioning safely, because inside of that pump house there is electrical outlets. So I don't want any water in there or any leaks. We also kind of replaced the frame where things were sitting. So the wood was rotten. So there was a lot of maintenance and repair that went into it, but we did it. I am so thankful for the staff and for the Wolf Care team. They all did amazing in trying to like make this work. Especially this been kind of like my first summer taking over this, and it's paid off really. Here we see Rika. So towards this is not something that's visible in the Explore or exhibit cameras, but this is the top of the pond. So this is where the water comes out after being filtered, and it's great to see Rika sort of taking advantage of that for drinking water, because there the exhibit water is kind of like right next to it over here in the right, but she still kind of chose to go in there and drink that water. So it just makes us happy to see that. So yeah, and I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So right now, the next thing in our agenda would be to feed the beaver. Again, we sort of moved the feeding to kind of coincide with this webinar, and you guys can get kind of that connection and how, wolf summer diet, it tends to include a lot more of smaller prey items that become available around this time of the year when maybe it's harder to get deer. So things like beaver. Um, so I'm going to share the camera and maybe just answer some questions as they come in, if you have any. Grayson's already waiting for it. um, and let me see what questions we have coming in. Oh, it looks like Cass is also in there. Yeah, Kaz and Grayson. So I see a question here about, is Rika's coat color becoming lighter? I thought maybe I was noticing that. Uh, you know, I don't know if maybe I'll have to look at pictures from previous years, but um, since I think I see them every day, maybe I don't notice those changes, like those kind of like light color changes. I don't know, but maybe. I know she's 3. She's still relatively young, so yeah. But it could be. It also could be just like that summer. She doesn't have her. undercoat. So it could just be like a summer maybe um, look that we're maybe it looks a little lighter than in the winter. Okay. So you have several different views here. So this is from our enrichment window camera. You can see that, um, they're at the gate where we're supposed to come in. So it's important for us to sort of encourage them to move away from the gate so that we can safely go in without hitting anyone with the gate or with the wheelbarrow. It's also kind of some of the manners that we teach them here. But they are pretty good about, pretty respectful of it as we go in, and they know the drill. And so there's Tanya again. And let me see if I can get different view, although this one's pretty good. Again, beaver we feed, that's usually our midweek feeding. It's a smaller carcass feeding. We like them to have different options or a more varied diet, not just carcass, deer carcasses. As we were talking in the presentation, their diet can be so variable throughout the year. So we try to just keep it diverse for them. We also offer, you saw some of the enrichment, but we also offer throughout the week some other smaller feedings just in case somebody didn't get as much as maybe they wanted to. So in that we can offer some like poultry or pork or beef that sometimes we get those meat donations. It looks like, as expected, Raiko is pretty interested. She seems to like beaver a lot and be pretty much the first on site there. But they were offered some venison donation that we got it was yesterday or this morning that we offer that. So if they don't look as hungry, that's probably why. But we were trying, since we moved that feeding from Wednesday to Thursday, we were also trying to offer them a little bit more in case they were getting too hungry. And again, another way for us is not just looking at behavior. There's Rika. She did a bit of a threat, did a lip curl when Cass approached. So she was definitely guarding that beaver that she's pulling. Looks like Grayson's waiting it out a little bit. And Cass, just it seems like also Blackstone probably growled. And again, everybody has a right to guard the food if you got there first. So yeah, so it seems like Blackstone and Rika are on it. But what I was saying too, yeah, another way that we kind of monitor and make decisions about feeding, if you're wondering, is also by looking at scat, and you can see Blackstone again. He's guarding, but Cass almost always gets away with it. So he's been pretty good about sharing too, I guess. So yeah, we look at scat, and if it's, let's say, if it's looking dry, if it's looking light, segmented, small, then we start making that decision of, all right, maybe we should offer some food tomorrow just to maybe help a little bit make up. But yeah, like I said, Cass almost always gets away with it, and we've been seeing a lot of pretty intense interactions between these two around food, and it's been really interesting. And it looks like Grayson's kind of given some space there. Again, any questions, please write them in the Q&A box and we'll be happy to answer. So yeah, the only thing, we take out the intestines, so the guts, so that they're not maybe consuming something that we don't want them to, that the beaver might have consumed, but also it just keeps the exhibit a little bit cleaner. But they still keep other organs that have a lot to offer. So they like the liver a lot, especially Grayson, Cass. They almost always go for the liver. But yeah, then we also leave like the heart, lungs and all that stuff. So looks like Rika walking away, and Blackstone and Grayson doing pretty good about sharing. Again, those two, I think, um, do pretty well together. They have a pretty close association there. Looks like we have a question. Which pack mate challenges Rika most often? That's a really good question. And maybe defining a little bit of what challenging would look like. I think Cass, okay, I'm seeing another question. Ah, let me see. So I would say Kaz, they have a very interesting relationship in that she just is more willing to be vulnerable around him, and he takes advantage of that a little bit and can kind of be a little bit more challenging to her, but she also kind of lets a lot of that slide in comparison to maybe Blackstone. She tends to be a lot more, exhibit a lot more dominance over Blackstone and sort of focus on him versus Kaz. And Kaz just kind of, I think, knows that he can get away with that with her. So that's what I would say in terms of who's more likely to challenge. I don't think Grayson's really um one to be looking for much trouble. So I wouldn't say Grayson. But Grayson definitely has been facing her a lot more too, when she's trying to like focus on him and like maybe do grab fights. He's been facing her pretty well, hopefully. Um, See another question. What was the fix on the pipe? Did someone manage to put a new section in? Yes. Yeah, so it had and I think I might have shared some pictures in the past webinar or an update. There was a maybe, I don't know, like an inch, 2 inches big of a crack in the pipe. So we cut that section. I say we, but some of our other more experienced in plumbing volunteers and staff cut that section, and then when trying to replace that section with a shark bite, it was kind of difficult and almost impossible because I think the pipe had kind of expanded to what the size would normally be. So then that we had to call in some plumbers to help us figure out what we were doing wrong. And they said, yeah, you would never figure that out. So I think they cut a bigger section and then were able to fill in with a new one. And it's been working perfectly and really happy about that. Yeah, let me see if I can get them. So yeah, the pond, if you saw it in the previous few days, there was a lot of floating debris. It was mostly deer hair, because they like to bring in sometimes some of their treats in the pond, and then it was getting really clogged. Let's see if maybe they went in the medical pen. Yep. They have been dragging a lot of carcasses into the medical pen. Um, and they do this sometimes, and um, I don't know if it could be a way to kind of manage um eventually like scavengers, kind of like bring it into a place that maybe there's not as much competition, but then that means sometimes that it is a tight space, and if someone's guarding, I've seen a lot happening in this medical pen lately because they've been dragging a lot of carcasses in, and then someone's guarding in it, and it turns into a lot of food guarding, food aggressiveness in there. All right. I think we have another question. In central Minnesota, we've had some big weather fluctuations over the past week. And I feel like we have too, maybe the past weeks. How do the wolves deal with hot and humid, followed immediately by cold and rainy? That's a really good question. I'm not sure if you're asking our wolves, for example, when we have those fluctuations. Again, I think they're pretty, and feel free to add Lexi, but they're pretty kind of exploit the resources they have. If we're talking about our pack and the enclosure, um, let's say hot and humid, they have different spaces that they can kind of use, and I think that's the case for us here in the exhibit pack, like taking advantage of all these multiple spaces, and that's what we can see. And sort of changing a bit their activities. We see that a lot too. Maybe just hunkering down a bit when it's hot and humid. And then if it's cold and rainy, you the next day see them like super ramped up and very different. Like just today, I was doing it behind the scenes, and somebody that had been here last week was here today and was like, such a big difference in behaviors. And weather is one thing. There's other things going on, of course, but certainly there's a lot of different ways that they kind of adapt. And I would assume that in the wild, they'll kind of try to do the same, and yeah, kind of try to use resources as they can and adapt their behavioral patterns according to it too. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I see some more questions coming up. Okay. I'm glad I answered your question, Hillary. What Voyageurs National Park wolves who feed mainly on blueberries in July lack protein to build up their muscles? Good question. Um, I think it definitely kind of takes a toll a little bit on them to sort of, and that's why you have to come see the exhibit. um, there's a bit of, yeah, a bit of um, a difference for them when they start just relying a lot or feeding mainly on blueberries for a little bit. I don't know if muscle buildup, um, it's the only like reaction there, but yeah, definitely um, would have some impact um, on their nutrition at that point. Since it's a relatively short period of time, I can see how they can maybe come back from that as other things become available. But yeah, it can certainly affect them. But yeah. And it looks like we have a few more minutes if there's more questions coming in here. Again, we have Grayson now dominating that beaver carcass. Rika came in. I think who was back there with the calves? Blackbeard? Blackstone? Okay. Oh, Cass is out here. Okay. So Cass has that one all to his own, to himself. But he realized there's another carcass that he needs to that he needs to go for. Yeah. Yeah, let's see. Now they're all four of them are in there. And I think I'm sharing sound, maybe not. I don't think this camera has sound here, so if there's anything that we want to hear, that would be kind of challenging. But yeah. Any other questions in the last couple minutes?
We do have this other question in the chat about wolves being able to digest fruits well, is which I think is a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know exactly. What I know is that a lot of times when you maybe look at the scat is that you'll find the seeds. So there's parts um kind of like with when they do carcass feedings, there's things that they don't digest the same way. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it's digesting fruits very well, but I know there's parts of the fruit that they won't, you can kind of see pass through, and it's not, yeah, there's a lot of parts kind of coming out. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope it was fun. I hope it was informative, and yeah, I hope you can visit and check out the new temporary exhibit and maybe join us in the next webinar in September, but also keep an eye out for our next update. Should be coming up this week. Um, so I know you got an update today, but there's maybe some little clips that you might not get to see in this webinar that you might get to see in the YouTube. So yeah, always feel free to reach out any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.